Hello everybody and welcome to another Python tutorial. This video and the next couple videos will be covering the else statement. Typically people only use the else statement with the if statement, but this isn't totally necessary. You can also use it with the for, while, and even the try statements. So, and actually the except statement, but we'll get to that. So first, why would you want to use it with something like the for, like a for loop? So let's say you wanted to run through a Python list looking for a variable in that list, and if you found that variable, you would want to do something. If not found, you would also maybe want to do something. So in my case, whenever I backtest stocks, let's say for example, we're going to go through a list of parameters, and if those parameters are met, then we would say, okay, we've got a buy, let's say. Otherwise, we don't have a buy, continue. Something like that, right? So let's say that's the case. So how would we actually do that normally? Well, first, we're going to need an example list. So let's say example list equals, and this list is going to equal 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to say y equals 3 for now. So we're just going to kind of define this fake variable. And then what we have to say is what we're going to do is we're going to run through this entire example list, and we're going to see if if the condition of y is present within the example list. As we can see, and already, yes, it is. But this is meant to just be an example. So the way that you would probably do this is you would have something like this, like matched equals, and the default is going to be, of course, false. And then you would probably write a loop like for x in example list, if x equals y, then print matched, and then we'll go ahead and say what we matched, because not only do we want to know if that was in the list, because really if you just want to know is this variable in this list, that's very simple. You just have if y in example list, right? But what if you need to know what that variable actually is, right? That's in that list, because typically y would be dynamic. So anyway, continuing on. So we want to know not only did it match, but what did it match. So the next thing that we do now is we need to say matched equals true. But if there was no match, we're still not covered, right? So the next thing we want to say is if matched equals false, we'll just print no match found, right? So let's save that and run that and make sure that works. So it did indeed match 3. Now if we change this to 7, for example, save that and run that, it's going to say no match found. But there is a better, more Pythonic way to do something like this, and that's going to be for else. So instead of all this, I guess what I'll do is I'll just comment this out so we can count the lines in a minute. It's going to be one less line to use for else, but it's also going to be a bit smarter thing to do. So now, oh, and in fact, we need to do this. Okay, so now we're going to rename this to 3 again, and now let's do the for else. So we're going to say instead for x in example list, if x equals y, print, and we want to print out the same thing as before, so matched, and then what was matched. And then we have to throw in a break. Now, let me get through this and I'll explain why we must have that break there. So then we add an else, print, no match found. Done. So the way you can think of a for else statement, see, most people envision the else statement as if the prior statement returns a false. That's kind of how they think of it. So they expect that the else will just be called if nothing actually executes in the for loop or something. And the problem here is that the for loop doesn't really inherently break when something happens. It doesn't return a false, and you could have multiple trues in theory, right? So it doesn't quite work like that. So the way that you should really envision this is this is all one big loop. So when you break, you're breaking past the else, right? Because the else is part of that loop. Right. So that's kind of the way to think about it. And later on, you'll see when we have except else, for example, except else works much more in the way that you might think it does, or it should. Anyway, let's say that we'll run it. And again, we have the same result. It matched 3. And if we changed y to 7, for example, no match is found. Now, at the end of the day, this whole thing is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines, and this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. So not a huge difference, but this is a completely unnecessary variable. There's also problems that could arise with the defining it like this. This is also a little bit more efficient because as soon as it's found, it's going to break for you. So that's kind of nice. But obviously, if you wanted to find maybe multiple matches, you wouldn't make it all the way through before it actually broke. So you'd have to kind of consider all of these things. But at the end of the day, this can also be used for a variety of other things, not just, like what I was saying. So anyways, hopefully you guys learned something new. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. Otherwise, stay tuned. We have a few more else statements to throw in, so stay tuned for those. And otherwise, as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support and the subscriptions. And until the next video.